Welcome to CTO Think, a podcast about leadership, product development, and tech decisions between two recovering chief technology officers. Here are your hosts, Don Vandemark and Randy Burgess.
Hey, Randy, what are you doing this week?
Let's see. The usual React Native Firebase work. Been talking to a lot of different. Like I've had people reach out to me about teaching and creating content around teaching. I guess it's August, so maybe the fall is triggering a lot of those kind of needs as companies probably start investing education dollars after the summer as well.
Mm-hmm.
I also took a somewhat of a part-time CTO position with a startup that I'll probably talk about more in the future, but they have spent like the last 2 years bootstrapping an application. They are about to launch with some new clients, and they, needed to have some technical expertise for bigger decisions, as well as kind of someone on call, like sales calls at times, to be able to talk at a technical level. So the fractional CTO role, we're going to go ahead and attempt to do that. The other one, I had a fractional CTO role I started in the spring, but I don't know if funding kind of affected them. When I've reached out, they were still trying to get funding, and they were holding off on any type of time investment on my part. So,
Sure.
Well, I don't know, like fractional CTOs are kind of a loose commitment both ways. So I guess you just kind of play it by ear and see where the needs are, which is fine. It's more affordable to them when they don't need you to not spend money, and it doesn't distract me much at all. So that's me. What's going on with you?
As you said, school funding loosens up a little in August, and we see that on the Aspire EDU side. We have clients who will sign contracts just before the fiscal year ends because they find additional money that they didn't spend. And then we have clients that sign right after the fiscal year starts. And a lot of fiscal years for a lot of schools are July to June. So that we see a lot of contract activity in the summer. And then started a new podcast on my own this time instead of co-hosting with you, and was fighting through some of the things. So just to bring everyone in on it, Randy does a lot of the back end stuff as far as managing the distribution of the podcast and all that. And I do the editing of the actual episodes. So Randy's the one who set all this up originally. So this is my first time through it, and I have to tell you, it's been a royal pain in my neck, and I have one company to blame, and that is Apple. I don't think Apple users know how bad life is if you're not an Apple user. And that's
maybe we do. Maybe that's why we're Apple users.
Yeah, you just bowed to the whims of Apple then. And that it's not me saying that Windows or Android is worse than Apple. That's a completely separate discussion. This is, if you're not in the Apple ecosystem, you miss out on a lot. And a lot of the things you have to do are, you either have to find an Apple device to do it on, or you have to do it some convoluted way. So I figured I'd bring that as a discussion point today, which is, as a tech executive, and we'll talk about apps and maybe other things, how do you determine what to support, what platforms to support, what customers to support? It's very obvious, and you and I had some discussions about one of the apps that I was trying to work with.
Yeah.
It was a very intentional choice of that creator to only support Apple and iOS. So I actually had to go bum an iPad device off someone just to create a login so that I could say, here's my podcast, please take it. I didn't want to listen to the podcast on their stupid platform. I wanted to make the podcast available to all their users, and yet I couldn't do that because I did not have an Apple device. And that was so backwards.
So let's, I don't mind naming it. So the platform you're talking about is the most widely of the ways that people listen to our podcasts. The one that has the most market share of devices listening to our podcast is Overcast.
Is that even over iTunes, or is iTunes above that?
iTunes has nothing to do. iTunes is an indexing service. iTunes does nothing except they have been chosen as the de facto podcast library for people to validate whether your show is legit. That is changing. People are like, why are we depending on Apple to do this? And Apple took a long time to update anything. But the Overcast is strictly it's not strictly. It has two things. One, it's acting as an index service of its own, but it's tied to iTunes. Like, it does use iTunes to source its feeds. It is also a player. It is also a podcast manager for your device. If you have an iPhone, you can always use the Apple Podcast app itself, as well as the dozen or so more that are out there now, Castro, Breaker, whatever, iHeart Radio. There's a tons. Stitcher is another one. But this Overcast was built by Marco Arment, who is one of the original indie developer / podcasters that has a lot of listener share in the indie development space. People look to him like he's a rock star because he's living the life people want. He built Instapaper, that app, which is actually pertinent to this discussion. He sold that off. He did another app or something. He's made enough money to live comfortably without working for a big company. But his history has always been working in the Mac space, and he unapologetically is happy to be there and doesn't want to work on other platforms and support other platforms. And support is the key word there, because as much as it's a pain for you to feel left out as an Android user, there's a pain point on the other side of the technology leader who has to make a choice on what his team's going to support. So basically, he has said that he doesn't see any tremendous value in supporting other platforms. And it goes into how much it costs him for support, how much time, if he has to hire people, mainly if he has to hire people, how much he has to code, how many code bases he has to work with, and the value that the return on investment that he gets if he expands. And he has said, I'm not doing it because the ROI isn't good enough in my view. Now, there may be some other conditions for that I haven't read about. His podcasts run like an hour and a half each, and they ramble way too much for me to, even if you speed it up, I'm like, I don't have this much time to listen to one person talk about the same things week to week. But When I have listened to him, I've learned things. He's smart. He's been there, done that, made mistakes, adjusted from them. He's had like 3 or 4 different pricing plans on Overcast alone. But Overcast is, because he built it at a time when Apple was kind of giving podcasts short thrift. Overcast is one of the most popular on the platform in the terms of designs and features. That's been copied now by other competitors, but he's done a good job. So that's the story of the app that you're talking about and why you found yourself in that position. It's a strategic business decision on the part of the developer to not care, not necessarily to not support. It's just he's not caring to invest his time and money in making your life easier outside of the Apple ecosphere.
All right, so let's dig on this a little, because there are parts of the argument I buy, and there are parts of the argument that are laziness, sheer laziness. And if it's not laziness, it's stupidity. Okay, so very specific example of Overcast. Okay, they have a way for you to log in through the browser. You can enter your username and password in the browser and access it.
Yep.
Okay. They've already figured all that out. Okay. What they lacked was the ability to sign up in the browser. Okay. So I get, we will dive in a few minutes into the why do you support Apple versus Android in a minute. But this specific example, I'm sorry, I don't buy it. Okay, this is stubbornness. This is laziness. This is being blind to it. It's something, but there is zero valid business reason to not allow you to sign up on.
Here's a problem. I'm going to tell you you're wrong, but I don't have the specific reason why. At some point in Overcast's early days, Apple gave him priority on something. Or Apple reached out to him and said, we want you to use our user authentication system for the app. Or they ordered him to. I'm not sure what went down. There's a whole he had a whole podcast and blog post about why am I using Apple logins for authentication and user profile and all that stuff. And he had a business reason for it. So as much as it ticks you off, he has chosen to use Apple as his authentication source. And that's why. And it was a decision that came down in like year 1 of Overcast being launched. And my guess is it had to do with stuff that he was doing on the app that was more advanced. And Apple's like, no, you can't manage your users that way and maintain this feature you're doing. But I can't remember the specific reasoning. So it had a strategic business reason for making Apple IDs the core of his authentication system.
Okay, I'll go back to stupidity, laziness. I still don't buy it. I buy he had a reason. Okay, I'm not going to buy it was a good unless it was Apple said here's 500,000, go do it, but use our authentication. Fine, got it. I'll live with that. That's a business decision.
So let's flip it around. I mean, you are trying to say that your inconvenience is like whatever amount it costs for him to support all other authentication systems. Your inconvenience is worth that to him, is what you're telling me.
Well, what authentication system are you even talking about? I look at my account on the website and it literally has my email address. That is the only thing in my account. So when I went into the app on the Apple device, I signed up there, and then I had to hunt for the place in the device that said create a username and password for the website. Okay. So there was literally something separate that said, yes, you can access it through the website, but you have to do it through the iOS app. Okay. All I'm saying is that there was nothing else there. That's my point. It's not like I open my account on the web and there's all my Apple ID stuff and my name and all that. It's literally my email address and I had to sign in with my password, neither of which came from Apple because I had to do it on the iOS device.
My guess is if you were to go and talk to Marco about this, he would, while he was lounging in his recliner in the back of his palatial estate in California, sipping a Mai Tai, he would say, "Who are you? Number one, and two, Windows or Linux? What? Android?
Okay.
What?" And then
no. But stop.
He would go back
but
to
stop.
you.
Wait, exactly. So he doesn't care, and that's fine. That's where I get back to laziness, stupidity, stubbornness. It's one of those three, and I refuse to get off that point because it is one of those three. Okay. Now, it's not just me. Okay. Anyone trying to create a podcast and distribute it on the number one iOS platform literally cannot unless they get access to an iOS device. That's bad business, period.
But I don't.
Okay, if I make, let's say I make the next great podcast, okay, millions of users. How am I going to get it? If I decide I'm going to be stubborn because he was stubborn and I'm not going to put it on iOS, I'm not going to put it on Overcast because I don't have an iOS device and I refuse to touch an iOS device. The number one podcast will not be on Overcast, period.
Well, I think
tell me that's a good business decision.
I think Marco Arment is gambling that you aren't bringing that to the table.
How could he even know?
When you use the terms like lazy, stupid, and I forget your third insult, stubborn, you're basically making a judgment call on what his needs are. On any developer, if you tell me that someone not supporting whatever means you want to log in,
no, that's not what I'm saying. But go on,
and you use those three terms, you're just making a judgment call for them when he's like, you know what, I can spend time with my kid, or I can build something for Don.
No, but I'm not asking him to build it for me. I'm asking him to build it for the majority of people.
An assumption
because
that you're making.
iOS is not the majority.
It is the majority of his customer base.
Okay. Different statement, which we'll get to.
But that's not lazy or stupidity. Again, that's strategic.
It's stubborn. Again,
it's strategic.
There's a very fine line between strategic and stubborn, and we'll. I think
Marco would say, you know what? All of the people producing million listener podcast use Apple.
To this point,
so that's fine.
You don't know that. You don't know that that'll happen in the future.
But here's the thing: he doesn't need to adjust until that one firm producing million listener podcast shows up and goes, "Hey, we don't use Apple at all. We use Windows for some reason."
So let me step back again. Okay, what are we talking about? I am not
strategy.
Talking about. No. What specifically am I saying that he should have done? Okay, am I specifically saying he should have made the Overcast app available to Android, Windows, BlackBerry? That sort of device? No, that's not what I'm saying. You want to make a strategic decision, and there are plenty of app developers that have made the strategic decision to only support iOS. Fine. I'll live. I don't care. I don't care to use your app. Okay? This is more about denying me access to the market. Okay? You've denied anyone without an iOS device access to that index, to that Overcast index. I don't care to use Overcast. It's probably a fine app, but you don't want to support it on Android? Fine, I won't use it. I got a podcast app I use that I love. But you're denying me access. And that is what makes the insults come out.
But, okay, but I think, and of course I'm going to put words in his mouth, but I think he's going to say, you did get access. You just had to work harder for it. And he's going to shrug his shoulders. I don't think it matters to him that it...
What am I asking him to do? I'm asking him to provide a way to sign up on the website. I'm not asking for anything else but that. Just a simple username, password, which he had to build in the iOS app. It's not, come on. You are now fighting a straw man because you're making the argument that it was a strategic decision to not support the ability to create a user account on a website. Yes, it takes a little bit of support.
That's not a straw man.
It takes a little bit of support. It doesn't take a lot.
You're making the assumption that I hate CEOs making and clients making for me. You're saying that you know how easy it is for him to do something on his own code bases and his own system.
I know generally what it's like to make a simple username, password, registration system. It's not trivial, but it's not significant either.
So
now,
he set up a system that worked for him, and he decided the cost of me, and by your own word, a non-trivial change, he's like, I don't want to do it.
Guess what? He's perfectly allowed to. He's allowed to make that decision.
But you can call him names.
But I can think it's the stupidest thing in the world.
Sure, yeah.
There are plenty of business decisions I completely disagree with that other people make. What I don't get is the defending of this business decision. So again, I'm okay if you don't build the app for non-iOS devices. I get it. But to deny access to creators, that is what rubs me wrong about a lot of things Apple tainted, specifically Overcast. Okay, this is one example. It is certainly not the only example.
I mean, Apple's not the master of this approach. Microsoft locked people out of stuff for years before Apple ever did it. Apple didn't have the type until now, until the iPhone came out. Apple didn't have a lockdown on anything.
Microsoft locked Lotus 1-2-3 out of producing spreadsheets once they created Excel? No.
There was tons of things you could not do on Microsoft without a Hotmail address for a while. Like they were all trying to capture eyeballs and user share.
I never had a Hotmail address.
All right.
I did plenty.
I did plenty. I'm not going to convince you by any means that Apple isn't the worst. So that's cool.
So let's go on to the rational side of why you would only build for Apple, for iOS. Okay. Because I'll defend that with you. Okay. We can go sit on the same side of the table of that one. Okay. So let me throw some statistics up at first and let's talk through them. Okay. What's the number one mobile phone platform in the United States by percent of subscriber share?
What is a subscriber?
Smartphone subscriber. So a smartphone being they actually bought a smartphone from a carrier, a mobile carrier.
My guess is Android.
It's Android. And it's Android at 54% and it's Apple at 44%. Okay. So all of a sudden you go, well, wait a minute. Why are people building for only iOS?
Not
And
all subscribers
like
are
I
the
said,
same.
I'm going to sit on the same side of the table with you on this one. Okay. But I just want to lay out all the points. Android is number one. You just said it. Not all subscribers are the same. What's different? You and I probably have the same reasons, but why would someone choose a lesser market share in Apple as the single platform to build on?
Because
what's your number one reason?
The income level of the subscriber.
That's absolutely true. It is. I don't have that stat. If I probably poked around a bit more, I could probably find it. But the income level of the subscriber is on an iOS device is higher than an Android device. Number two is the amount, what's the word I'm looking for? The average app price that a user is willing to pay on an Apple device is higher than on an Android device. On an Android device, people are looking for free, period. It's hard to sell a paid app on an Android device. Yeah. Really hard. It's not. It's less hard on an Apple device. People are used to it. I'm not saying it's a great thing, but I'm willing to sit on your side of the table for this.
It's farmer's market versus flea market.
Okay, that's a good analogy. Sure. So those are all perfectly valid business reasons to only build for Apple, to ignore the majority of the market, to take a minority part of the market and say, I'm only going to focus on that. Those are perfectly valid reasons that they're paying customers and they have the income to pay. They have the ability to pay. Okay. So I agree. That is a reason. And if you were to turn around and build an app for iOS, it is not usually as simple as flipping a switch and all of a sudden it works on Android. It is another significant development effort and it's another significant support effort.
Yeah.
Okay. And I would say it's even harder to support Android than it is to support iOS because there are many flavors of Android.
I don't even know. But
whereas
I would assume that
you can march down the Apple dictatorship of only the iOS operating system if you build towards iOS. Oh, did I let that slip in there? I think I did. Anyway. So it makes sense why startups especially say we're only going to build for iOS. Uber, iOS only for a while. Okay, I couldn't get an Uber when it was first out there, and I was in San Francisco. Mm-hmm. I couldn't get an Uber because I couldn't put it on my phone. There are plenty of apps that you talk about. I'm like, yeah, they don't build it for Android. I can't even look at it.
Well, most people are bootstrapping, and they can only afford. I mean,
they can only afford one, and they're going to make the choice of the. Okay, so here's where I'll get a little cynical. Okay, they're going to make the choice of iOS because of all the reasons we discussed. I do think there's a cynical reason. There's a couple cynical reasons. All the VCs probably have iOS devices. They don't have Android devices. Again, we're talking income level problems here. So the VC is going to want to see it on his phone. And if you want to be a VC, you have to have an Apple device in order so that you can see all these things. That's where I start to get queasy. There's all this self-fulfilling prophecy about it. it's just a cycle that feeds upon itself. So I get it, and I agree that you have to build to where the money is.
That cycle is by design. I mean, that's what Apple.
Okay, agreed. Did people like it when Microsoft did that? No. Why are they accepting it when Apple did?
Because Microsoft failed at delivering when Microsoft did it. People were locked in. Like people that have, like, MacBook people aside, MacBook has started to slip, but everything else, you don't have unhappy users feeling trapped.
I think that used to be the case. I wonder if that's the case here in the middle of 2018.
I don't.
You just hinted at it, right? You said MacBook's one thing because MacBook maybe quality's starting to slip a little.
That's the developers. That's a developer wing.
Okay.
We're talking about users.
I understand. You don't get the impression that people are starting to feel like iPhone development is not progressing, not giving them what they want. Because that's the feeling I get as an outsider. And maybe I look for that sort of stuff.
I mean, the complaint is about keyboards. That's the only complaint you're going to hear from the people. There's like, that's all. That's, I mean, I use a MacBook Pro. I'm listening to the people that complain, and the keyboard is the number one thing that they're mad about because it is crappy.
On a Mac, you mean?
On a MacBook, yeah. Yeah,
okay.
Because they did some. I mean, I actually talked to a Genius Bar person about it. It's a stupid flaw, but I mean, the toolbar, like, they increased prices for a while. They didn't add any extra power. They fixed that problem. There were a number of security issues that they kind of let slip by, and no one got hacked because of it, but it was bad press. So you have a number of people, but as soon as those folks leave and go, okay, I'm going to build my own Linux machine, they all come back. Like, they're coming back and they're buying 2015 Macs so they can just get back in and use the Mac again. I mean, it's not like this huge like, there's not a bunch of pitchfork protesters about MacBook Pros. It's just there's rumblings that you didn't hear for a while. It was a favorite device of developers, but that's completely different than you're talking about iPhone users.
And I get the feel. I as an outsider, I thought I was getting the feeling that people were less and less impressed with new iPhones. More like, yeah, I don't know what I'm getting here. There's no significant reason for me to upgrade, I guess would be the best way to put it.
Yeah,
you tell me I'm wrong. That I don't know.
I don't know that you're wrong. What I'm saying is I don't find that people are dissatisfied being on Apple, whether they stay with the older version or go with a newer. So there's a different argument for people don't know if the incremental changes in the updates is worth the upgrade. That doesn't mean that they're discontent with the current, what they have. It just means that Android is obviously catching up, and Apple is not necessarily like pushing out new features that are grabbing like people's attention for the value.
Sure.
As an iPhone 10 user, I can tell you that I found the latest, most expensive phone to be really worth it. Like,
okay,
it was, to me, great. Like, the features and the screen space and the FaceTime or Face Lock, whatever the hell they call it. Like, it's awesome to me, but it's also $1,000, which I can justify because I use it for work.
But that's okay. That's okay. The Samsung Galaxy Note 8 I have is also $1,000. Okay, price is price. Okay.
Yeah.
I love things about my Note 8. I hate things about my Note 8. I wish that it was more standard and stock Android than Samsung, whatever Android flavor they're running. But I very much enjoy my. Now, you pulled out a feature that I thought was one of the ones that people were revolting against a little when it came out, and that was the Face ID on the 10. I thought in my Twitter stream, I saw a lot of people saying, yeah, it doesn't work. You're saying it works great. So that's what I'm saying. I that's where I got that impression that they were releasing things that just weren't working. But I'm not a user, so I can't speak for outside of my circle and figuring. And trust me, my circle is very heavy Apple based. We live in this world where it has to be. That's the tech world. So
I mean, I can only say that I don't pay a ton of attention to the gossip blogs around Mac anymore. I think that the hype is gone. Like the changes are no longer slam you in the face. This is cool. So people from version to version are looking at a mature product, a mature code base, and there's nothing wowing them. You don't see, but that is not to. I guess I'm grown up past the point of caring, but what I don't see are complaints about the value or problems with the devices.
And that's fine. And like I said, I don't have one. I just react on what I see. And what do you see in the Twitter sphere more of is you see more of this doesn't work the way I wanted it to. Then you see, oh, this is kind of cool. Kind of cool. You will see this is cool. You won't see, oh, this is kind of neat. Because that's just a reaction you don't see a lot of. So, and now I want to be as close to unbiased as I can because I'm not. But I do know that the Galaxy S9 and the Note 9 early reviews are they provided this was a gap year for the Galaxies.
Yeah.
So the ones that are coming out now aren't incrementally all that much better than the 8s. And everybody's like, yeah, it must be that they're just kind of pushing the new one so that they can get to the 10 where they expect changes. Who knows? I'm not saying that everything Android is great. It's not. But that's just part of it. And yeah. I do have issues with the Samsung flavor of Android that is run. But I think I'm willing. I don't think I'm willing. I am willing to accept the why do you restrict what you're doing to a single platform.
So let's talk about what I deal with when I start a project with a new client or a new boss. Because this example is good for what I worked on a couple of years ago with Innovations for Learning. The CEO sits me down. We're talking about what their platform needs to support. We're building applications for low-income kids kids in low-income based schools, K and first grade. And he instantly says to me, we must support Apple products. And this is only like 3 or 4 years ago. The tide of what devices are in schools has changed dramatically in that period of time. But True. based on what our relationship customer, we were a nonprofit, but we had the sales associates still of some kind. Their feedback to us was the schools we're going into are using iPads, and he wanted to single-handedly start pushing Android because fiscally it was a much better choice to have Android devices in schools. And so he was wanting to push for Android development. And so we looked at all the goals and stuff we had. I'm like, if I try to support native apps on these platforms, React Native was not really mature. PhoneGap was the only thing we had at the time that was considerable. We were looking at doubling the size of our team, and adding a good chunk of time to the build for all this stuff to be ready in a school. And you only have a window of really the fall to be there for the beginning of the school year. So
Right.
even he, like, at first he went in, we need to support everything. And of course, I'm sitting there thinking, you have no idea what you're asking for. But as I just kind of broke down all the different tools and expertise we would need to meet this need at that time, he changed immediately to, let's just start with Apple. And I think that that's what almost every, if you're in a startup phase, you're always looking at what's the best starting point. And when you are at the big company phase, you're looking at market share. I don't know that I believe like, I understand that there might be bias in the VC market because VCs probably have Apple products in their hands. But I also think that there's enough VCs that do the studies on the numbers and volume that, depending on who the user base is, they would say, if you're trying to reach this kind of volume, you must have Android. Like, they would know that now.
I would agree. I'll give them enough credit for that. Sure.
But I do think there's a bias. If everything is equal, and you would say to a VC, where do you want us to start? They're going to go like, well, use what I can use on my phone. And I guarantee you that bias is there. But
Yeah.
it's, and the whole idea of the React Native and the Wix, or whatever they call it, these different platforms that allow you to code once and push to multiple, the hybrid apps. Like, the idea is that you can consolidate your development into one code base. Airbnb is now notorious for their blog post a couple weeks ago where they were supporting React Native, using React Native on their code base. And then they made a strategic decision to quit using it and go native for both Android and iPhone.
Sure.
I think Facebook has kind of championed React Native because they were like, we don't want to keep writing code for two different areas, but we must have coverage on both. So, there are, to me, it's always strategy. I don't think that even Marco Arment sits there and, well, actually, he might, because he can. He might sit there and nonchalantly go, I don't give a crap. And I just don't think there's an impact on him, so that it is a strategic choice about his own use of time. And so having been put in the position of defending, not trying to support everything for budgetary, like, resources, whatever constraints, I just have a much more sympathetic look on when I am not able to access something because of a choice was made not to care about that market. Now, I would say that being part of the Apple family on user base or usage, I don't really suffer much ever. So I can't.
No, what are you missing? Nothing. You're missing the open. What you're missing is the openness of the Google Play Store. But that's a different discussion, probably for a different time.
Well, if openness means 20 versions of farting apps, then I think I am missing out. I don't know.
See, I told you, you're missing.
But
I don't want somebody. I have to be careful how I say this because I probably do in some cases. I don't necessarily want somebody curating every aspect of my life. And like it or not, you're getting curation with the Apple Store. Some people say that's a feature, not a bug. And you just kind of made that point that it's a feature.
But
which is fine.
You use curation for search with Google, right?
See, that's where I said I probably have to retract that statement at some point in the future. Or I do like curation in some aspects. Is that curation? Is Google curation?
Of course it is.
It's algorithmic. So yes, it's algorithmic. But Apple's is not algorithmic as much. It's more open than it was in the past, I will say. The getting into the app store is probably a little easier than it was in the past. But that's when biases develop, right? And that's my stupid, stubborn, lazy bias is I don't like the way Apple like to curate everything for me. So I've carried that bias with me for years. And I've tried all their devices. I don't like them. So
the algorithm is written by a human who come with installed biases.
Sure. And I won't argue that point.
And definitely, once you know the rules of the algorithm, which are leaked, or there's definitely companies that have access to the algorithm's nuances that other people are not privy to. So to me, Google is completely curated at some level. I mean, right now,
I'm not gonna let you get away with the word curated, because that's just not true. Curated means somebody sits there and chooses. This is an algorithm sitting there and ranking. So the
curation only involves humans.
In my definition, yes. that is, in my definition, that is what makes something curated. Okay.
It
can be sorted, it can be filtered, but it's not curated unless there's a personal touch involved.
What I don't have in front of me is the 2018 edition of the Merriam-Webster Vandermark Dictionary.
We can certainly look up the word curate.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. It's curated really means filtered, categorized, tagged, and everything by the person creating the list. I'll give it that it's more than that. But at the core of it, when you do a search for Google, I would imagine if you were to give it a random, give me a random result set from my search, you would get a widely different result than what you get consistently, which is a curation based on your previous searches and what you tend to look at and your location.
We're quibbling over the definition of the word curated because I don't disagree that Google's sitting there and sorting things for me. They absolutely are, and they're doing it by my preferences supposedly, and their own algorithmic biases. Okay, I'm not blind. I'm not stupid. I know all that. I think we're arguing over the definition of curated, and that's neither here nor there. Just interestingly enough, a curate is a member of the clergy engaged as an assistant to the vicar, rector, or parish priest. Just so you're aware, that's what a curate is. To curate is to select, keyword, select, organize, and look after the items in a collection. So it nowhere in there does it say human, right? So that's our own individual definitions. I tend to not like. I can't go into. I can't go too deep down this rabbit hole because I will sit there and tell you that Facebook's algorithmic sorting of my newsfeed annoys the heck out of me, yet Google's algorithmic sorting of my search feed doesn't. So I have biases. I'm quite willing to admit to them. I like one of the biases. If I were to have a startup, If I were to be starting up an app idea, I can I tried never to say never. I can almost guarantee that it would not be iOS only. Now, might there be some market force that says, well, you're stupid because the majority of your buyers are going to be iOS people? Sure, in that case, maybe. But if I were to make an app today, I'd probably have it on both platforms, fully understanding the development costs and the support costs are going to be higher because I made that biased decision. And that would be lazy, stupid, and stubborn on my part. But that's my business decision to make.
Well, yeah, it is. I mean, but the thing is there's a strategic reason to go strictly with the web right now.
Agreed. To go with just React Native and be done with it, right? Or like, some sort of hybrid, and just be
no. I'm not. React Native is still native. I mean, it basically compiles down to a native code base. It's not JavaScript on your app. What I'm talking about is, let's use the example Fantrax. That's the fantasy sports manager that we both use. They have had an app for years, but they recently upgraded their site to be a progressive web app, which is following a list of rules that Google has for good performance on the web. And their site works great in a web-like or an app-like way on the web. So if you truly want to be accessible by both iOS and Android devices, you go with the best app experience you can build on a web or a mobile browser. That's what you're aiming to do. And until you find traction from one side or the other, you can always find out what kind of device hit your app.
That's true.
Maybe that's when you make the choice based on, one, are we not reaching as many people as we could because we lack a native app? Two, do we have a definite number of our user base that's using one of the other platforms? Three, our competitors do they have an advantage because they have an app or something? Are there features that we can't really get? Like, you're still going to have location-based issues. You're going to have probably offline issues if you're using a web-based one versus a native one. Like, that's when you start to make those choices. I think it's a mistake, actually, for most companies to go the native app route immediately. Like, prove that the mobile browser experience doesn't satisfy the use case of your solution.
But that's an August 2018 statement.
Yeah.
It's not always been true, and it probably will not always be true. These things go in cycles, and I'm well aware of that. So, yes, in August 2018, you're best off building a progressive web app and starting there and figuring out what you need to do further from that. So we're approaching the end of an hour. When you and I were discussing this very topic yesterday, I think I said we'll make it a 2-hour episode about the fall of Western civilization due to Apple. But I think I beat that horse to death enough. I do think just my summary statement is I think Apple users are, for the most part, unaware of what life is for non-Apple users. They may not care, and I'm not asking them to care. I'm just saying it's different, and in some ways it's hard. And my example of Overcast is probably the most telling example of a minor thing that turned into a major thing.
Yeah.
and he's not alone in that decision. I don't agree with the decision. I've insulted the man who's made more money than I probably ever will. But it's my bias, my thoughts on the process.
I think I took exception to terms that were insulting. I think, like, I can't call Mark. I don't think lazy fits him. I don't think stupid fits
Stupid
him.
doesn't fit him, and stubborn might.
Stubborn, yeah, but that's
Now, am I calling him stupid? Am I calling him lazy? Am I calling him stubborn? That's what I was saying. What I meant was the decision. The decision is lazy. The decision is stupid. The decision is stubborn. I'm willing to go to the mat that it simply is not all that hard. And for you to sit there and say, yes, but he chose not to do it because he wants to go spend time with his kids. Okay, I get that. That's fine. Perfectly, he can make that decision. That doesn't mean it's a good decision.
now I haven't done this, so I'm not gonna. This is not a getcha type of like. Here's a link. You're wrong. Did you Google this by any chance to see if you can log in without an Apple product?
Did I Google it? No.
Okay.
Okay. What I did is I went to the Overcast site. There was a login page. I tried to log in. It wouldn't let me because I didn't have an account. And there was no sign. If there was a sign, I don't remember if there was a sign up link or if there was no sign up link and it said, there is no account by that email address. In order to sign up for this service, you need to download the app on the iTunes store. Period.
I'm just curious. Like I'm purposefully not looking it up.
I would not sit here and be as opinionated as I was in this scenario if there was a way to do it. If I had not gone down this road and was pretty sure there's no way to do it, and I'm trying to recreate what I did. So yeah, it says, sorry, that email address does not have an account. You can create an account in the Overcast app. That's all it says. And you click on get the app, it takes you to the iTunes store. So you're done. At that point, you're done. So that's why I felt I was pretty sure of myself on that one. So
yeah, I mean, anyway. Ultimately for me, I think that the cost of a team supporting a wide range of platforms, and I feel like your experience at, what was the name of that Atlanta firm?
Media Current.
No, well, yeah, it was the app company though.
The app company. I worked for Coney, which was
Coney.
Yeah, they made a platform that let you publish to both.
Yeah, like to me, like that world is rife with risk, making choices, betting on platforms, and I just, I understand the frustration when you are kind of told, hey, you want to use this particular tool or site, but you must use something outside of your norm to access it. I understand the frustration.
But again, it wasn't use the app; it was have access to that market, right? Which are two different things. I want to be really clear there.
Yeah,
two different things. I was being denied the opportunity. Denied. Okay, that's what upset me. Not that I couldn't use the app,
but there was another way where you reached out to the person that uses Apple and said, "Hey, submit this link for me, man." That was like, I feel like that's part of the strategy of, in the developer's mind, if someone's any good at this, they're gonna have a way to get around this thing I'm not creating, this avenue I'm not.
And that's fair. Again, we're going to go around circles on this. My point was it was a minor change. It was minor change, minor support. That's all I was asking. So, all right. So we are at the hour mark. We'll wrap up here.
All right.
You got anything exciting coming up in the next week?
I'm taking away all Android support for chasms.
Awesome. Do that. In fact, I want you to take away all iOS support. I only want you to support BlackBerry. Okay?
Slack. You must have a Slack account.
You've seen their latest commercial. The BlackBerry is going to be the thing. So, all right. So anyway, thank you. Good discussion.
Yeah.
And we'll talk again soon.
All right. Later.
Thanks for listening to the CTO Think podcast. Show notes and previous episodes can be found on our website at ctothink.com. Reviews on Apple iTunes are always appreciated and help promote the show. Patreon contributions help us to produce episode transcripts, which allow people that are deaf or hard of hearing to access the show. If you have feedback, ideas, or want to be a guest, please email us at hello@ctothink.com. Show music is Dumpster Dive by Mark Wallach, licensed by premiumbeat.com. Voiceover work by meganvoices.com. You'll hear from us next week.